Last but not least, we are very honored to have with us Professor Jouke Van Dijk. He works at the University of Groningen at the Faculty of Special Sciences. He is also the president of the European Regional Science Association. Please, Professor Jouke Van Dijk.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we are a bit running out of time, so I try to do it as quick as possible. What I'm going to talk about is the impact of graduate mobility on human capital inequalities and regional performance. Does this work? The outline of my presentation is that I want to say something about human capital and economic growth in nations, but also in regions. Individual benefits are one thing, but also the regional benefits, so you have to distinguish between that, and it's not the same. Education is not the same as skills, and there is a lot of mismatch. And then I want to talk about human capital and migration, and especially about the labor market migration of higher educated, and the spillovers the education of the jobs of high educated may have on low educated. Brain drain is a worldwide phenomenon. There have been a lot of studies, and worldwide there are some countries who have a talent surplus, like India, Brazil, and there are some countries who are expected to have a talent deficit in 2021. One of them is Italy, but also Japan, and also the Netherlands is more or less in the middle. So there might be a problem worldwide. On the other hand, we know that knowledge capital and economic growth are correlated. When you look at the level of countries, there is a clear positive relation between the stock of human capital and the growth of human capital in the long run. So there is something with countries, but this is also true for regions. Now, these are familiar pictures which many of you have seen from the European Cohesion Report. GDP per head shows substantial differences. The south of Spain, the south of Italy, and Central and Eastern Europe have lower GDP per head. Now, when you look at employment, more or less the same picture. When you look at unemployment, it's highly correlated, it's more or less the same. The same countries are always in the most worst situation. When you have a more broader indicator, like the risk of poverty, of social exclusion, it's again more or less the same regions who come up. Is this correlated with education? It seems that it is, because this is the share of low educated in the left graph and the share of high educated in the right graph. And you see more or less the same picture. The regions which have usually low unemployment rates, have lower GDP, higher unemployment, have the lowest educational level. And especially with regard to tertiary education, I think Italy stands out with a low share of high educated. I don't know why there is such a big difference. With the low educated, Spain and Italy are more or less the same, but for the high educated, Italy does shows up much less. I don't know how it is, but I guess you know. Other indicators are early school leavers. The same countries and regions show up with quite low, high levels of early school leavers, and also low shares of continuous training after graduation, adult education. So there seems to be a clear relation with schooling. But when you look at other indicators like life expectancy, then Italy and Spain do quite well. And Europe does quite well. There is only one state in the US who has a higher life expectancy than the average in Europe, including Central and Eastern Europe, including Southern Europe. That's only the state of Minnesota. And all the others have a lower life expectancy than Europe. And Italy does quite well. There is also research which clearly shows that education has a relation with health, and especially with the years of healthy life. And then it turns out that higher educated males and females live about 8 to 10 years longer than those with low education. So Italy has low education, but they live quite long. So at least this shows that it's a complicated relation between education and well-being indicators in the broader sense, not only economics. There's also a relation with income inequality. It was mentioned in the previous presentations. Inequality is a bad thing. And these graphs clearly show that there is a negative relation when you divide regions in two groups. Then there's a negative relation between income inequality and growth. And we also heard that there is an accumulation of human capital. So there is something going on. It increases inequality, education, and that is negatively related to growth. There are more things going on the labor market. We see a lot of automation and robotization. And that means that especially in the middle segment, jobs are disappearing. At the low end of the labor market, there is a constant number of jobs. But all countries show that in the middle, jobs are disappearing. And the low end, the low count, and the high end number of jobs increases. That means there is a high risk of social exclusion, especially for the middle educators. Now, that's more or less the setting. Now we go to some more detail. The individual relation to some benefits of investing in human capital is very, very clear. Higher educated have a lower risk of unemployment, they have higher wages, and they have a better health and a higher life expectancy. So for the individual, it's clear. Higher educated are also more spatially mobile. And that's because they have better access to information, they are better capable of covering the cost of moving because their wages are higher, etc. And also, if they once move, they often move a second time. So it's a highly mobile group. And this highly mobile group should have an impact on the distribution of the spatial distribution of human capital, and it has. But it's not clear where they go to, because a simple neoclassical theory predicts that where people should go from high regions with high unemployment and low wages to regions with high wages and low unemployment. And in the end, it should equalize. But in practice, this does not really happen, because in and outflow are highly correlated, and often the relation with economic factors is quite low. We know that since the famous study by Lowry, that the distance between regions and the size of the regions matters, but economic factors are only of marginally importance. Now, the relation between earnings and education is clear. The higher you're educated, the more you will earn, and the lower is your risk of unemployment. That's also true for many other studies. I will skip that. But education and jobs and matching is not always one-to-one. There is a lot of mismatch in the labor market. You have vertical mismatch. That means that the level of education is too high or too low for the job. And you have horizontal mismatch. That means that you have a certain type of education. You have a job at the same level, but in completely something different as what you studied. So these type of mismatch are apparent. And then it matters if you talk about education or skills. Do you talk about a mismatch for one individual job or for a whole career? That always makes a difference. And there is a lot of literature about mismatch. There are all kinds of definitions. It's a very complicated issue. But that there is a problem is quite sure. There is a lot of educational mismatch. On average in OECD countries, about 25% of the people are over-educated, overqualified, and about 22% is underqualified. And Italy is more or less in the middle. So that means a lot of people don't have the education which matches with their jobs. When you look at skill levels, it's a little better, but also here there is a big gap. A lot of people are underskilled or overskilled. Now this has a lot of negative consequences. They are listed, I will not go through it in detail, but for individuals, for employers, and for the society, there are a lot of negative effects of that people don't have the education which fits with their jobs. But an interesting question is, for instance, over-education, that people are too high educated for the job, also bad from a regional perspective? It might be not, because if people stay in regions where they cannot find a job at their own level, but they stay there, it might increase the productivity and the income in the region, because they still are more productive than the average worker if they stay. If they move, then they go out of the region, and this may be even worse for the region than if they stay. Now, when we go to migration and human capital, as I already mentioned, neoclassical theory is quite clear. Then there should be an equilibrium in the end, but we all know this does not happen very often. It's more cumulative causation, as already mentioned. High educated, they move to the cities, and they attract more, and then you get a cumulative effect, and that means, in the end, increasing regional disparities. A variant of this is the escalator model. Then you also take into account the generational issues, and that if people have a family, that their locational preferences are changing. And that means that first the young people, they go to the big cities, but after some time, when they got children, they move farther away. I think you showed this in one of the graphs, that first they go to the city, but then they also go for a part back to the countryside. So this means, for a policy perspective, is in or out migration good or bad? The answer is not yet clear. Now, I will skip this, you know this from migration. I will say something about research we did on graduate migration behavior in the Netherlands using longitudinal data, where we could follow people for about 25 years. We know the year people are graduated, but we also know what they did about 7 to 10 years before and about 15 to 20 years after. Now, this is a simple one. Young people, they start at a certain moment, they start studying. This is a large part are all studying. But you see, already before they graduate, a substantial part of those who graduated have a job, and after graduation, this increases enormously. And then you can see how it goes over time. And for instance, this shows that a lot of people become self-employed when they are older. So this is the basic thing. We know the year of graduation, and we know a lot of these people before they graduate and after. Now, the young people have the usual patterns. They move from the countryside to the cities where an institute of higher education is. So this is also the case in the Netherlands. All the red dots are increasing in population size of young people, but all the others are losing. And in the end, you get a redistribution of human capital. All the red areas, they have a substantial higher than average education, and the blue areas are lower. And usually, nearly in all cases, this means that the cities where a university or an institute for higher vocational education is, they gain in human capital in the long run. And this is a kind of escalator model. But we found for the Netherlands that the effect of the sorting on the regional level is larger than between different parts of the countries. In each part of the country, the bigger cities, they recruit all the talent from the surrounding areas, and only in the end from the city of Groningen, only a small part in the end goes to the Randstad area in the Netherlands. But the redistribution effect is the biggest in the northern part of the Netherlands itself, and the same is true for the other parts of the country. So there is some net flow to the central part of the country, but the redistribution of human capital within the region is much larger. On the other hand, a lot of graduates don't move. If you look at this picture, and this is again the year of graduation, all higher than this, all these people don't move. Only about 20 to 25% move, and only about 10% moves to another part of the country. So most of them stay put in the region where they are. They migrate within the region, but not between different parts of the country. And if they move, they go to Amsterdam, because Amsterdam is the magnet. You see here different patterns. Again, we start about 10 years now before graduation. And then we see that, for instance, the city of Groningen attracts a lot of students from all of the country. The same with Rotterdam and the same with Amsterdam. But Groningen already goes down just before graduation, because some of them, they move after they graduate to Amsterdam, because Amsterdam also attracts graduates till about 4 to 5 years after they graduate. So there is a sorting process first before they start the study, and then after the study again. Another issue is that people commute very long distances. And that's more and more common, especially for higher educated. People only have to go 1 or 2 days to the office, they work at home, or they have meeting everywhere. So it becomes more and more flexible, the relation between the workplace and the place of residence. Especially when everywhere ICT broadband is available, people can work from everywhere. So the conclusions of our research of brain drain are that the conclusions are that the region loses, the city wins, and in the end, especially Amsterdam, but a lot of people stay in the region where they are. An interesting question is the city of Groningen, for instance, in the end, they lose students. But if they should not have come, I think it should have been even worse for the region. So instead of brain drain, what a lot of policymakers say, you could always also say it's a very clean export product, because you attract people, they spend their money over there. So for the region, I think it's better to have a big university if some of the graduates leave afterwards than when they move immediately to other parts of the country. Now, done some very shortly, something about human capital externalities. Are there effects of low-educated workers that they benefit from others? Now, there are several types of externalities. Production externalities, if knowledge spreads over in the region from low to high educated. It can be consumption externalities, and that means that higher educated, they consume, and this creates jobs for low educated. And an interesting question is, these production spillovers, do they appear at the regional level or at the firm level? Now, we've done extensive research. I will skip the methodology. We have a nice data set where we know a lot about the people and about the firm where they work and about the region. And we have about 99 small regions. And what we try to distinguish is between a production effect and a consumption effect, by looking at the educational level of the people who live in an area and the people who work. And because the regions are quite small, there is a lot of commuting. Now, that's what we do. I skip the regressions, but what we find is that the influence on the individual wage, that's the dependent variable, that the private net return on average is 8%, and there is a social net return of 3.8%, and that's mainly to production externalities, mainly to consumption externalities. And if there is an externality in production, it's in the firm, because in the region it's 0. We did the same again for low educated, and then is what we found, that the returns to education, private, are much lower. And that means that the gap will increase, because the return to an investment in education for lower educated is lower if they invest an additional year. So that means increasing differences between low and high educated. But low educated, they profit from externalities a bit more, and especially from consumption externalities, but also from production externalities when they work with higher educated people in the firm. So that's a big thing. The knowledge, the production spillovers, they take place within the firm, not in the region. And we have data in which we carefully can do this. So I will skip this and go to my conclusions. Higher educated are the most spatial mobile group in the labor market, and especially in the years just before and after graduation. But a lot of them stay in the same region. So if you want to bind them to your region, you have to do something just in the years before and after graduation. Once they stay for more than 3, 4, 5 years in the region, then they will stay more or less forever. The impact on the regions is quite complex. Sometimes it leads to increasing differences, and sometimes differences will be narrow. But if they leave, it's brain drain, but maybe also you already had some benefits from them. And if they stay, it might be underutilization from the national point of view and from the individual point of view, but the region still may benefit. And therefore, overall, my conclusion is that investments in education, private, are beneficial, both for the individual, but in the end also for the regions. Thank you.